Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I am Nick Millward, an advisor here at the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. Just a small bit of housekeeping, just to let you know, at the bottom of the Zoom application, you should see the Q&A buttons and the chat buttons. So if you've got any questions or any comments, please post them in there. We'll try our best during this session to cover all the questions with answers, and if we don't, we'll follow up with you afterwards. So as you may or may not know, netnumber have a range of number intelligence solutions, and these serve the interconnect, roaming, and wholesale environments so that calls and messages are completed to help combat fraud, but also ensuring cost-effective routing of messaging. So today we're going to talk about this relating to services such as 10DLC, toll-free, and inter-carrier communications. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Marco Lafrentz and Catalin Badea from netnumber. Marco is responsible for global business and market development, and Catalin leads the global products. So guys, let's begin. Maybe starting with introducing yourselves, if you'd like to do that, and maybe let's talk initially about data and how routing and phone number data goes together.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. I think for the MEF audience, I've been visible over the past week, so I spare them even further comments on my bio, and I would step right into the topic here. So I would say, to answer your question best, we probably start off by clarifying what we mean when we say routing, as I think that will illuminate the importance of data here. So routing in its basic form basically is making decisions, ideally informed decisions, the traffic flow of voice calls and messages. Or in other words, like a routing or a routing engine determines the technical system and or connection that's going to process the call or text message next. And despite this question appearing seemingly simple, the optimal decision for that is rather challenging, because you must fulfill a variety of goals here, and these can sometimes be conflicting. Because in the end, the routing decision is, although it sounds technical, is more of a business decision than a technical one. I would even go as far as saying wholesale providers, when they're dealing with routing and have a routing team, they could even think about this as their customer success department. And as far as I know, a few successful providers even think of routing as customer success. Anyhow, so I think the three main goals that you have to balance when it is about routing is you maximize the successful termination. So you need accurate data to establish the baseline of what's the destination. The second thing you typically care about is minimizing your termination costs, because we all run profitable businesses, which brings you basically to least cost routing. But that's not all. The more important step and the final step to really find a good balance and a sweet spot is to optimize your user experience. And then you have to take into consideration things like features, be there delivery time, throughputs, call quality, and other rich features that you can choose. And in today's ecosystem, and now I'm bridging the gap to this has been solved and that's known. Today, it becomes even more challenging because you have to make all of these decisions considering and embedded into the frameworks of legal compliance, or fraud prevention, and of ensuring trust. These are elements that haven't been that prevalent 3 years ago, and they become of increasing importance. So now as we've established an understanding, I would say, of what's routing about and the complexities behind that, I think it becomes visible that you cannot just manage traffic on the A and B number of a communication transaction alone. You need phone number data. On top of that, you require additional insights. And the better the data you have access to, the better your decisions are going to be. I think this brings me back to the question saying that like routing isn't meaningful without additional like phone number data. You cannot make an informed decision and will end up with bad guesses. And that will ultimately then lead to poor service quality and probably even worse profitability. So to sum up my answer, routing managers and routing engines would be like lost if they don't go hand in hand with high quality data that is accurate, complete, reliable, relevant, and timely.
Great, thank you, Marco. Catalin, would you like to maybe first introduce yourself as much as you like to, and anything else to add to what Marco said?
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm Catalin Badea, responsible for product management here at NetNumber. No, I think Marco covered it very, very well. Maybe just to add a nuance to something that he mentioned. People often think of routing in terms of the right selection of a destination, the destination carrier. There is an equally important aspect in identifying and correctly assessing the origination of a telecommunication transaction, be it a message or be it a voice call. No matter if we're speaking about origin-based rating, which is common in Europe and a few other geographies as well, or if we're speaking about do not originate use cases. So there are also scenarios in which assessing the origination of a call or a message is equally important, and we'll cover this in more detail later in today's presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Catalin. So I guess a lot of the services that I'm personally aware of kind of originate out of the US, but obviously, you know, some of these are being looked at in Europe and other regions as well. But in terms of you know, with that in mind, but considering routing, how have the global needs changed from your perspective, and where do the gaps still exist? I guess question to Catalin.
Yes. That's an interesting question. One thing that is clearly a trend is that more and more countries implement number portability services. We are at over 110 countries globally doing that. And every year you have 5 to 10 new countries on average joining this. So automatically there is a need in the market to properly resolve phone numbers that are ported from one operator to another. This gives us the opportunity at NetNumber to collect all those data sets and provide a global routing service to our customers. Another thing that is worth mentioning here is that when we look at North America specifically, which I think is kind of the focus of our discussion today, there are a few things that are really interesting about that part of the world. And first of all is that it's a mature market. Number portability has been implemented for a very long time. It has unique services that are not available in other parts of the world. For example, the text enablement of landline numbers, it's something that, it's a concept that is only operational in this form in North America today. So thinking of a business that has communicated a certain phone number to their, user base for 10, 20 years, and that number was available only for voice calls, but in this, new ecosystem, that number can be text enabled and that business can interface with their users over text messaging as well. It's a really powerful and a very popular service as well. There are hundreds of millions of telephone numbers in North America that are text enabled for this purpose, a really important share of the phone number space there. And the other thing is that the US messaging ecosystem has evolved in a way that essentially the routing for text messages is not identical to the routing for voice calls as we're used to in other parts of the world. So we at NetNumber, we manage the messaging routing registry. It's called the NetNumber Services Registry. There are multiple use cases that flow into that. Again, we will cover a few of those use cases later during the presentation.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think to add to that, like that's I think what you see in terms of development of actually like the more traditional like routing cases, which is like the delivery and the coverage and the determination of origin and destination. But what has happened also over the last 2 to 3 years, and what you observe is probably due to the immense squeezing of margins, is that fraud is spiking. And with that, like, regulations are increasing. Yes, telecommunications has been strictly regulated since forever, but not to the extent it becomes regulated today. And you see the introduction of further requirements from governments with the multitude of like releases over the last year. And you also see that in our industry, right? Like the number of fraud and revenue assurance themed working groups and panels have also spiked. So I think one of the global trends today for routing is that adhering to legal requirements becomes part of the routing day-to-day business, which it hasn't been before, right? Like content requirements or like only sending at night, like those have been the only things that existed, and that wasn't really the issue of operations. But now also including do not call lists, do not text lists, do not originate lists, number recycle checks, pre-registration of sender IDs, pre-registration of content, templating content, registration of URLs. Like there is so much that you now on a day-to-day business have to incorporate sure that traffic can flow. It creates like a stronger dependency on good service providers, I would say, for operations departments. Like they need very good data, but they also need services that help them streamline the other processes around it to govern all of these things. And I think with all of that, like we almost like forget the good old triangle of routing and take it for granted. But you still need very good and sophisticated services to allow telecommunications to be as ubiquitous as it is today.
Indeed. Thank you, Marco. So Marco, just to carry on from that, the term net number or NNID has become industry standard now. So can you just tell us what led to the creation of this ID system, and how has it enabled routing to date?
Yeah, I could go very far back. I'm not sure how I want to go back, but in its simplicity, I would say the NNID has become the standard for routing. And for our non-US audience, you can probably compare its role and the relevance of the NNID to the MCC MNC, right? So there is a big difference between the messaging ecosystem in North America and rest of the world. Like here in Europe, where I live, and the majority of other regions, the GSM is the telco standard and technology used for SMS and interconnections. But in North America, that wasn't always the case, right? There was CDMA and other technologies. So this led to the implementation of central hubs for interconnections. So the translation of a mobile phone number into an IMSI prefix for message routing wasn't a thing in North America. It didn't exist. So instead, phone numbers were translated into net number IDs that are technology independent. And for those of you who are not familiar with the NNID, US or not US, like it's basically a 6-digit code that unambiguously identifies the service and carrier of a phone number, completely independent of technology, right? And for this purpose, like all of the global carriers get mapped to an NNID, even those that don't have an IMSI associated to it, right? And that's the beauty of it. And if you do that you realize that concept is so powerful that it can actually create new innovative virtual services, and has since been the foundation of other successful communication platforms that are IP-based, like Google or Twilio or Vonage, right? So they are really based on that concept that you can create new innovative telecommunication services, even using like programmable SMS without being tied to the GSM technology.
That's great. I mean, I think having that external source, from my personal experience, having worked within some of the carriers, is essential now. So with I guess services or solutions out there like 10DLC, A2P, toll free, inter-carrier applications, etc. we seem to be at this inflection point where standard routing might need more optimization. Maybe Catalin, could you explain that a bit more, please?
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I think a short definition of some of the terms here would be in order. Some might be familiar with them, some might not. 10DLC or A2P, 10-digit long code. This is how A2P campaign traffic or A2P campaigns over long codes are called or are named in North America. It's the most popular channel for A2P communication these days. And that's because of it's cost effective, it's fast to set up. So there are many use cases and many brands out there that are using the 10DLC channel to communicate. NetNumber is the registry for this information. So in our NetNumber services registry, the phone numbers are tagged with so-called A2P properties. So if they belong to an approved A2P campaign, they are tagged with the respective campaign information, and that information is used in the ecosystem for accurate routing and for fraud prevention, for billing. There are many purposes that it serves. At the same time, we're the authoritative registry for text enablement of toll-free numbers as well. So any 10-digit length number, standard rate, or toll-free is in our registry if it's text enabled. So with the definitions here, I'd like to highlight that aspect that I mentioned earlier, the fact that origination, the verification of the origination number is equally important. So why is that the case? So why we need to verify the destination number is quite obvious. We need to choose the appropriate route from a quality, from a price standpoint. This is something that Marco explained in a lot of detail. I would add here that in North America, it's critical to use the NetNumber services registry data for the termination bit as well. In the absence of it, if you look at a number that's a non-mobile number, you don't know if it's text capable or not, so if it can receive messages or not. However, with our data, we will accurately identify for each and every phone number if it is text enabled, so capable of receiving SMS or MMS. So that's just to complete on the termination piece. On the origination piece, if we look at the newer use cases like 10DLC, the ecosystem is using the NNSR for proper routing and for proper fraud prevention. What do I mean by this? If there is a message traveling through the ecosystem, let's say with the specific phone number as a sender ID, and that message is deemed to be A2P by, let's say, a firewall provider analyzing the content of the message, there's going to be a check and a match against the net number data to assess if the sender ID is also a legitimate A2P number. Was that number previously registered under an approved A2P campaign? If that's the case, everything is perfect. If that's not the case, then someone is trying to use the P2P channel for A2P traffic, and that's something that, depending on the operator, there are different policies of dealing with that. Yeah, just to highlight on the importance of verifying the origination as well. And the other aspect here is, also with increasing do not originate requirements in North America. Do not originate was something that existed in the voice space for a long time. Now it's something that the FCC is mandating for text messages as well. So making sure that a phone number is a legitimate source for messaging in general is a new use case, and a use case that we equally serve. Given any phone number in North America, we can accurately tell if that number is capable of sending messages or not.
Okay. So just to go off track ever so slightly, we're talking a lot about messaging and voice predominantly, right? Is there any other channels out there that NetNumber would kind of support? And I'm thinking about things like maybe social media, or any other I guess communication mechanism, or are we predominantly, or are we only really looking at voice and mobile messaging here.
Interesting point, right? I didn't expand on that after my comment when I said like routing seems to be so easy and all of the problems seem to be solved. Like routing is a problem of interconnection, right? Because like if there wouldn't be any interconnection, you wouldn't need routing. Like it's all in network, like it's fine. So it becomes a challenge when you have multiple networks and start interconnecting them. So to your question, yes, there is definitely going to be a role of our services when you start interconnecting, for example, other OTT services. Yeah? When you translate, like, or when you connect different RCS networks, like they might be unified in one way, but today there are still like separate RCS networks and you have to interconnect. Like whenever you have that case and you have different interconnection points of different like network providers, they need to translate whatever they have as an identifier for a destination to something that connects to their platform, right? And that is done via a lookup. And this is where we play a role. So how can you translate that to other services, right? So if you think about the phone number, that's what we talk about today. And you think of the phone number as being the identifier for like an end user. Now, in theory, you can now think about, okay, you have to interconnect messaging with WhatsApp. They also have the phone number as an identifier, right? But you don't know if that guy is on WhatsApp or not. You don't know if that guy is like on RCS or not. Like you need a service that resolves that and helps you like identifying that. And on the other hand, if you're the other network and you accept that, you also have to like know whether that's actually a legitimate sender or not. Right. So if WhatsApp really opens their platform as they have announced and other connections like are established, there is the need for digital identity verification, similar to sender ID verification in that space as well. So when we're dealing with social platforms and their messaging services and their interconnection, they were going to face the same problems as messaging has faced like 20, 30 years ago, which is the interconnection. And we're there. This, yes.
Great. Well, I, as I'm sure you guys know, and probably most of the people on the call, I'm coming at this pretty much as a layman, but I do see, you know, from your perspective, opportunity to open up that that world of lookups to other areas as well. And I guess that then comes with its own challenges around, you know, data management and data compliance. But perhaps we'll just stick to the here and now a little bit more. So I'm going to refer to my notes again, just so I don't get this wrong. But how does the addition of fully qualified domain name, FQDN, factor in here? What does that bring to the table? Catalin, I don't know
Sure.
if you can...
Absolutely. So yeah, back to the here and now, as you mentioned, Nick, back to messaging, to text messaging. Our goal here at netnumber is to make it as easy as possible for our customers to consume the data, to be able to make those, you know, smart routing decisions that Marco talked about. And you know, kind of in general, we provide our data via a variety of APIs. Enum and REST are the ones that are typically used by most of the customers. The thing that we notice, however, is that customers have different capabilities in terms of the platforms that they have and the flexibility of the platforms which they have internally. So some of those platforms might be easy to adapt, easy to, you know, integrate a new API, easy to change the service logic, but some might be really, really difficult to change. Maybe it's a platform where, you know, it might be even out of support, or it's really expensive to engage with a vendor to change something in the platform. So one thing that we always do is, you know, how can we expose the data in more ways, in different ways, to make sure that the integration effort for our customers and the integration cost in the end stays minimal. So in that spirit, the addition of the fully qualified domain feature to our services just enables that. So each customer has some sort of routing logic internally. They have a, you know, they have a routing table. They have some sort of routing logic where they their platform or their platforms decide, you know, if the destination operator is ABCD, then the message has to flow via this route. If the destination operator is XYZ, then it has to go via this other route. So what happens, however, is that some of these platform routing capabilities at our customers are sometimes really, really limited. And the FQDN basically enables customers to outsource the routing service logic to NetNumber if you want. On a customer basis, we can kind of host their routing logic, and then the APIs, the responses that we provide to our customers via the APIs will be enhanced with a certain information that will point automatically towards the route, the bind that needs to be selected by their platform to terminate the messages.
Okay, so I mean, at the core, it seems that having access to the right information in the right place at the right time is vital. So what data do carriers and service providers, etc., need, and why is that?
Yeah, so I can cover this as well. So there is no lack of data out there. I think the challenge is that the data is really, really fragmented, and in particular, in North America, there is a high level of fragmentation. Historically, different services evolved in different ways, different formats, different vendors, different areas of responsibility in the market. Kind of in order to visualize this, there is a number portability database, there is a code range database, all these, there is a toll-free number database. So there are many databases out there that evolved over time. Now, what's challenging for any service provider, a carrier in particular, but any service provider, is to integrate all this data. Like I said, it comes in different formats, it comes with different contracts, it comes with different APIs, different commercial models. It can be really tedious to implement this. So what we do is that we procure, integrate, normalize all the data, overlay it with NetNumber's unique data, like the NetNumber services registry data, and then exposing this to our customers in a unified way. And when I say unified, I mean in a unified contractual way, in a unified pricing way, in a unified API way. So you don't have to look into 3, 4, 5, 7 places. Just give us the number, and then in a single API response, you're going to have all the information about that phone number that exists.
Okay. Great, thank you.
I think one point that has become extremely important in terms of data that you need to make good routing decisions is data that allows you to evaluate the purpose of a communication, right? Like you have to, yes, terminate the voice call and the SMS, but you also, if you remember, have to make sure that you ensure trust and prevent fraud. And at the same time, you also have to protect yourself against inflated traffic and messages or malicious phone calls. So the data that you need is not only just technical, but it also has to do with like the sender and the originator of that call or that message, right? So in addition to technical data that allows you to translate whatever has been given to you into something that your systems can process, you also need now data that allows you to evaluate the purpose of that communication and to put it into context, right? For A2P, you need to know, is this a business communication reaching out to a consumer, or is this not a business number? Is this business number something that has registered a certain use case, and is that use case being serviced actually the same as was registered, or is it different? You need to know whether that originator or that phone number has potentially like implemented like attacks in other networks around the globe before it hits your network, right? So there is so much intelligence that is now becoming relevant with regards to fighting threats and like modern attack vectors that haven't been so prevalent in the past. That it is a lot about also like identities and reputation, which is a new flavor, I would say, compared to what has been used in the last decade for routing.
Right, thanks. We've got a question here. So, and just to say for those on the call, just please keep any questions coming on the Q&A. So, a net number. There's a new net number service, or net number service called Number Check, which is great for optimized routing, as I understand. Marco, could you just explain this a bit more for new and improved use cases, maybe bringing it home a little bit, just talk about how that actually works in the real world?
Yeah, I'm happy to put this into the context of what I have just said, and the product details are probably best answered by Catalin. So in the context of what I have just said, right, not everybody is yet ready to really process in their like day-to-day operations. In flight, the question, should I actually process this communication request, yes or no? Or should I like put like further analysis around this, like put it on hold, put it like in a quarantine and process it further before I send it out for like communication that is not instant. And the number check is really the one that helps you answering that question, right? So it's not about finding the destination, the fastest path, the cheapest path. It's giving you insights into the question, should you be processing this at all? And that is related to the tighter grip by the authorities, by tightening the regulatory framework around you, by the increased fraud attacks, the impersonation attacks, and the very smart like subscriber attacks that are being out there, and overall with the entire like desire to like improve the trust in your network, right? Every service provider wants to carry as little malicious communication as possible because that is their reputation, right? You don't want to terminate malicious activities towards subscriber. You don't want to hand it over to a partner network. You want to keep that in control in your network as much as possible. And number check is definitely a service that provides an answer to that. But I hand over to Catalin for what it actually is.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a real-time number verification service, as simple as that. So any phone number in the world, it's an API service. So for any phone number in the world, we will return a confidence index that identifies the likelihood of the phone number being either invalid or valid and active. And there are different data sets, different signals that flow into that. The end result is a simple to consume confidence index from 0 to 5 that helps our customers make those right decisions that Marco explained. One other nuance that I like to add in the context of number check is that there is increased regulatory activity on blocking communication from phone numbers that are invalid or illegitimate in the respective geographies. So in the US, there's been several FCC report and orders that address texting, unwanted texting in general. There are some rules about blocking certain types of messaging sender IDs. The UK had such rules for a very long time, and they've been just strengthened with additional requirements. And there are many other geographies. So in the context of what we're discussing today, it's an essential tool, as Marco just explained, not only to select the right destination, but also to decide, do I need or should I route this message or this voice call at all?
Right. And so how can organizations get these tools and the right tools in their toolboxes within their own ecosystem? Maybe.
I love this question, right? We could probably talk about an hour just to answer this question. What can you do? What are the right tools to improve there? I probably want to limit my answer to just like one answer. That I must limit myself to one answer. And I will probably take the interest of all of the regulators in all of the different countries into what to do about it as the main motivator, right? Organizations themselves don't have, like, when you think about like what organization, like brands, they don't have a lot of control and insights into telecommunications. Like there is not a lot that they can do by themselves, right? In the telecommunications world, it's there are tools that you can implement, but then you also have to consider it is a competitive environment, right? So whenever you have a competitive environment, a solution for an ecosystem becomes a challenge. So what you need is a neutral third party that is facilitating. And a lot of governments are currently running requests for information on what a government can ask the ecosystem to implement and provide in order to improve things like spoofing, for example, right? Like the thing that, like brand impersonation, that somebody is actually mimicking the digital identity of somebody else. And what we see in the United States is that like central registries can prevent that. Like if I must limit myself to one tool that like any messaging ecosystem should establish, it's probably a central registry for phone numbers and the metadata associated with that phone number. We have seen that in the United States that spoofing is difficult because you have to register a phone number in combination with a service provider that owns and uses this phone number, that is servicing it, which makes it impossible for anybody else to use it, which is amazing. Like that kills the majority of spoofing problems that other countries have. I think because the GSM standard just made everything just out of the box works, there was never the need for additional investment into other solutions like it was in the United States. But number portability and central databases for number portability have shown that it is a very good concept to solve a lot of the industry problems, as long as that like central database is run by a neutral third party that has no share in traffic routing, with regards to like traffic carrying, I mean. And that would be my one like very strong toolkit, the central registry for phone numbers and who is running services on that phone number.
I agree. I think trust and comes into almost every element of what we're doing right now. Obviously, there's some issues in the market out there with fraud. So I think having the independence like netnumber can offer certainly is incredibly valuable. Huge amount of value to the businesses connected into you. Is there anything else?
Yeah, you see this in other areas too, right? I mean, like central ID registries, whatever like sort they have like taken on or whatever shape they have taken on, like also the MEF registry in the UK. Yes, it's for the banking vertical, and it is very like focused on a certain area, but it has success, right? And whenever you have a third party facilitating on these things, and you can double check. And like another good example is the central ID registry in Singapore. Like these things work, right? If you have that and you have a authoritative source of information, right, that is to my earlier point of high quality data, meaning it is accurate, it is reliable, it is timely, all of these things, then a lot can be done. And decisions that are being made are just like better.
Indeed. Catalin, anything to add to that from your perspective?
Sure. Maybe one thought in the direction of fraud prevention. We touched on it, but I think it's worth exploring it in a little more detail. We spoke a lot about phone number metadata, number portability, number verification, this type of use cases. In order to keep pace with the fraudsters, this type of data is just not sufficient anymore. Spoofing is not possible in the messaging ecosystem as per Marco's explanation. There are many tools and a lot of efforts that the industry has done over the years to make fraud difficult, but the fraudsters evolve. And one of the major source of fraud in the US messaging ecosystem these days is social engineering. Some people call it, pig butchering. It's a name that you might like it or you might not like it. But if we use social engineering as the umbrella, it's a type of fraud that is very difficult to detect. It's difficult to detect despite the fact that carriers have firewalls and things like that. it's easy to detect a malicious link potentially. It's easy to detect suspicious content in a message, suspicious phone numbers. That's not a problem. It's difficult, however, to detect fraud when it looks just like normal person-to-person communication. So there is a lot of effort in the industry at the moment to address this specific type of fraud. And something that we at NetNumber we've partnered with a company called WMC Global. They are an expert in messaging fraud prevention in the US, and we're working with them on phone numbers that are confirmed to have been used by fraudsters for fraud in the financial industry space, and then taking that information to the wider ecosystem so that when one of those phone numbers shows up somewhere else, anyone can benefit from the fact that that fraud has been detected and stop potential fraud across just a wider footprint.
All right, thank you, Catalin. Okay, are there any other topics that we haven't already covered? I think we've pretty much answered the questions that have come in. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, Marco?
There is nothing additional that comes to mind right now. It's really about, and that has changed, the completeness of the information that is being used for routing, and the additional challenges teams are facing that they haven't been facing before. So there is an investment required in that area. But going back to my earlier point of central registries, all of these investments are motivated predominantly by avoiding harm and potentially avoiding losses, which is good. But if you take into consideration like other services, and I want to extend the conversation at that point to potentially like another country, let's say Italy or Germany, right? So if I'm interacting with a brand here, they give me a landline phone number for their call center where I can call, or for their retail shop, right? If they're going to engage with me on messaging, they will use a shortcode. And if I want to engage with them on WhatsApp, they provide me a mobile number. So there is no unified digital telecommunications like identifier for me to like engage with this brand. And it is even worse, depending on like what they have done there, they might even have to change that after a short period of time. All of this is like can change if you have a central like registry that would allow you to configure virtual services on an identifier, right? It's like it would be amazing if my bank here in Germany could just use like the phone number of the retail banking station that they have down the road for me to engage with everything. Texting, WhatsApp, like all like on one phone number, but they can't. It's just not supported in the ecosystem. Whilst if Germany would introduce a central registry, like it could actually be done. And the United States has shown how it can be done and how successful it can be to specifically during the pandemic, move retail business to messaging and to the mobile world.
I think this is one of the biggest risks that that we face currently in the mobile ecosystem. That is getting that trust with the end consumer, and having these systems in place so that the brands can advertise these services, so that they know if a certain communication happens, then it is absolutely from that. It is from that brand they're receiving information from. I think it's
If all of that would happen on the same phone number, right? And I would be used to that. If I would ever get a text, right, from a bank or whatnot, the immediate thing I would do, I would call them back, right? Just to see who picks up and whatnot, and send a WhatsApp. I would try all of the channels that I have for that phone number. But as I'm not used to that, as I'm used to getting like an SMS that says, okay, if you want to reach out to our support, here is a different phone number, like that doesn't make me suspicious if a fraudster abuses that, right? So it's the concept of how the services are set up and how the users are like used to that makes it like rather easy in certain cases to insert malicious content, right? So yeah.
So, Catalin, is there anything you would like to close with? Anything final to add?
No, I'm good in general. If anyone in the audience is interested in, more about what we do, netnumber.com, reach out to us directly on LinkedIn. Happy to engage.
Absolutely. So we'll share the information from this webinar and contact details afterwards. I'd just like to conclude just by saying thank you very much to you guys, and for probably increasing my own IQ by around 10 points today, certainly in the mobile world around number intelligence tools. So thank you for that. So again, I think I'll double check if our main host Mina is there, if there's any other questions or chat that we need to cover. If not, I will say thank you.